The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Colfax Avenue in downtown Denver, painting the brick facades of old buildings in shades of amber and gold. The first hints of autumn were in the air, that crisp Colorado coolness that arrived each September without fail. Leaves from the old oak trees lining the street drifted down occasionally, crunching under the feet of commuters hurrying home from work. On the corner of Colfax and Broadway, beneath the awning of a closed barber shop, sat James Mitchell. To most passers-by, he was just another homeless man, another statistic in a city struggling with housing issues. But James Mitchell was so much more than that. At 53 years old, James carried himself with a certain dignity that homelessness hadn't quite stripped away. His weathered face told stories of harsh winters and harder times, but his eyes, those steel-grey eyes, still held a sharpness, an alertness that came from years of military training. His greying beard was neatly trimmed, maintained with a small pair of scissors he kept in his backpack. His clothes, though worn and faded, were clean. He made it a point to visit the shelter twice a week for a shower and to wash his limited wardrobe. Next to him, arranged with almost military precision, were his few possessions: the olive-green backpack that had seen better days, a sleeping bag rolled tightly and secured with paracord, and a small cardboard sign that read in neat handwriting, "Homeless veteran, anything helps, God bless." But it was the items arranged carefully in front of him that told his real story. A folded American flag in a plastic protective case, and a photograph in a cracked frame showing a younger James in his army dress uniform, standing proud and strong, flanked by other soldiers. Next to these, he'd placed his military ID and a Purple Heart medal, also protected in a small plastic case. James wasn't panhandling aggressively. He never called out to people or shook a cup at them. He simply sat there, sometimes reading from a worn paperback book he'd found in a free library box, sometimes just watching the world go by. When someone dropped change or a bill into his cup, he'd look up and say, "Thank you, God bless you." And he meant it every time. The evening rush was beginning. Office workers streamed out of buildings, heading to the light rail station or to the parking lots. Some avoided eye contact with James entirely, focusing intently on their phones. Others walked past quickly, pretending they didn't see him. A few regulars, people who passed this corner every day, would stop and drop $1 or $2 into his cup, sometimes exchanging a few words. "How you doing today, James?" asked Mrs. Patterson, an elderly African-American woman who worked as a receptionist in a nearby law firm. She dropped a $5 bill into his cup. "Better than some, Mrs. Patterson." "Thank you kindly," James replied, his voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who'd spent too many nights sleeping in the cold. "You have a blessed evening." "You too, honey. You stay warm tonight, okay? Weather says it might drop to 40 degrees. "Yes, ma'am. I'll head to the shelter if it gets too cold." As Mrs. Patterson walked away, James adjusted his position against the wall. His right leg, the one that had caught shrapnel in Kandahar, was bothering him today. The weather changes always made it ache. He rubbed his thigh absently, a habit he'd developed over the years. The street was getting busier now, that magical hour when the city transformed from day to night. The streetlights flickered on, one by one, casting pools of yellow light onto the sidewalk. The air smelled of car exhaust, mixed with the aroma of garlic and spices from the Italian restaurant across the street. Then James heard it. The distinctive rumble of motorcycles. The sound grew louder, that deep, throaty roar that only Harley-Davidsons make. 5 bikes rounded the corner onto Colfax, moving in a tight formation. They pulled up to the curb about half a block away, parking in front of a sports bar called McGinty's. The bikers dismounted, pulling off their helmets, their leather vests adorned with patches and pins. James recognized the type immediately. These weren't weekend warriors or rich guys playing dress-up. These were real riders, weathered, tough men who'd earned every patch on their vests. He could see even from this distance that several of them wore the distinctive patches that identified them as military veterans. The leader of the group was an imposing figure, about 6'3", broad-shouldered, with a salt and pepper beard and arms covered in tattoos. His leather vest bore patches identifying him as a member of Brothers in Arms MC and a Marines patch. He said something to his companions, and they all laughed before heading into McGinty's. James smiled slightly. He'd been a biker himself once before life went sideways. He'd owned a beautiful 1989 Softail that he'd rebuilt from the frame up. That bike had been one of the casualties of his descent into homelessness, sold for far less than it was worth when he desperately needed money. His reverie was interrupted by a different sound, the aggressive rev of a high-performance engine. A sleek, midnight blue BMW M4 came speeding down Colfax, weaving through traffic with the kind of reckless confidence that comes from youth, money, and a sense of invincibility. The BMW screeched to a halt at the red light directly in front of where James sat. The windows were tinted dark, and the bass from the car's sound system was so loud James could feel it vibrating in his chest. Some modern rap song about money and expensive things. The light turned green, but the BMW didn't move immediately. Instead, the driver's window rolled down slowly, revealing a young man who couldn't have been more than 22 or 23 years old. Tyler Harrington III was everything his name suggested. Old money, private schools, country club memberships. His blonde hair was styled with that casual yet perfect look that took expensive products and time to achieve. He wore a pastel pink polo shirt, the collar popped, and aviator sunglasses that probably cost more than James made in 6 months of panhandling. On his wrist was a Rolex that caught the streetlight and gleamed. Tyler was on his phone, having a FaceTime conversation with someone. His voice carried clearly across the few feet separating his car from James's spot on the sidewalk. "Dude, I'm telling you, this city is going downhill," Tyler said into his phone, his voice dripping with disdain. "You can't even drive downtown without seeing these people everywhere. It's disgusting." The person on the other end of the call said something James couldn't hear. Tyler laughed, a sharp, mean sound. "Yeah, man, there's literally one right here, just sitting there like he owns the place." James kept his eyes on his book, used to this kind of commentary. He'd developed a thick skin over the years. Words couldn't hurt him anymore, or so he told himself. "Bro, hold on, I'm gonna do something," Tyler said, his voice taking on that tone of someone about to do something they think is hilarious, but is actually cruel. Tyler leaned his head out the window, looking directly at James. Hey you!" James looked up slowly, meeting the young man's eyes with a steady gaze. "Yeah, you. How much you make in a day sitting there? Like $20? 40? Tyler's voice was mocking, cruel. "That's pathetic, dude. Get a job like a normal person." James said nothing, just looked at Tyler with those calm, steel-gray eyes. He'd learned long ago that engaging with people like this only made things worse. "What, you too stupid to talk? Or are you high on something?" Tyler continued, emboldened by James's silence and his friend's laughter from the phone. "Let me guess, you're a veteran, right? That's what the sign says. Well, newsflash, buddy, nobody forced you to join the military. That was your choice. Your bad decisions aren't my problem." Aubry, a few pedestrians had stopped watching the scene unfold. Some looked uncomfortable, but nobody intervened. James's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I'm not asking you for anything, son. Just sitting here, minding my own business." "Don't call me son," Tyler snapped. "And you are asking. That's what that pathetic little cup is for, right? You're begging. It's embarrassing." The light had turned green again, and cars behind Tyler's BMW were honking, but he ignored them. You know what? I got something for you," Tyler said, and for a moment James thought maybe this privileged kid had a shred of decency, that maybe he was going to offer some money. Instead, Tyler worked up saliva in his mouth and spat directly at James. The spittle hit James in the face, landing on his cheek and beard. Time seemed to slow down. The noise of the city faded. James sat there frozen, the ultimate humiliation burning on his face. Several people gasped. A woman nearby said, "Oh my God, did he just—" Tyler laughed, that same cruel, sharp sound. "That's all you're worth, old man? Absolutely nothing." He rolled up his window and peeled out, the BMW's tires squealing against the asphalt, leaving James sitting there with spit on his face and his dignity in tatters. For several long seconds, James didn't move. His hands, resting on his knees, slowly formed into fists. Not from anger, though there was anger there, but from the sheer effort it took to maintain his composure, to not break down, to not let this moment destroy what little self-respect he'd managed to hold on to. With a shaking hand, James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small packet of tissues, the kind hotels give out, something he'd saved from better days. He wiped his face slowly, carefully, each motion deliberate. He was aware of people watching, and that somehow made it worse. A middle-aged woman approached timidly. "Are you okay? That was horrible. Do you want me to call someone?" "I'm fine, ma'am. Thank you for your concern," James said quietly, though his voice betrayed the lie. But James wasn't fine. In that moment, something inside him, something that had held on through 2 tours in Afghanistan, through the loss of his wife to cancer, through the descent into homelessness, cracked a little more. The street was buzzing with conversation now. People had witnessed what happened, and some were recording the aftermath on their phones, though none had managed to capture the actual incident. "That kid should be arrested," someone said. "Did anyone get his license plate? This is assault. This is literally assault." But James tuned it all out. He carefully refolded his sign, packed away his flag and his photograph, and began organizing his belongings. He'd been spat on before, by life, by circumstances, by his own bad decisions. But somehow, this felt different. This felt like the final straw. As James was preparing to move to a different location, to escape the pitying stares and the well-meaning but ultimately useless commentary of the crowd, the door to McGinty's opened. The 5 bikers emerged, clearly having witnessed the incident through the bar's front windows. The big man with the Marines patch, whose name was Marcus "Bull" Henderson, walked at the front of the group. His face was set in hard lines, his jaw clenched tight. Bull had served 3 tours in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan. He'd led men into battle, held dying friends in his arms, and come home with scars both visible and invisible. He'd struggled with PTSD, with anger, with the transition back to civilian life, but through it all he'd maintained a code, honor, respect, and looking out for those who'd served. When he'd seen that rich kid spit on a homeless veteran through the bar window, something primal had awakened in Bull. It was one thing to ignore the homeless, to walk past without engaging. Bull didn't agree with it, but he understood it. But to actively humiliate someone, especially a veteran, that was unacceptable. The 5 bikers approached James, who was now standing, his backpack slung over his shoulder. "Brother," Bull said, his deep voice gentle despite his intimidating appearance. And we saw what happened. James looked at the bikers, seeing the patches, recognizing the kinship. "It's all right. I'm used to it." "No," said one of the other bikers, a wiry man with a long beard named Danny "Snake" Morrison. "It's not all right. That was disrespectful as hell." A third biker, younger than the others but no less tough-looking, named Jake "Rookie" Patterson, added, "Did anyone get his license plate?" "I got it," said a fourth biker, a stocky Hispanic man named Carlos "Tank" Rodriguez, holding up his phone. "I filmed the whole thing from inside the bar, got his face, his license plate, everything." Bull extended his hand to James. "Marcus Henderson. People call me Bull. I was with the Marines, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines." James shook his hand, his grip still firm despite everything. "James Mitchell, Army, 82nd Airborne. Did 2 tours in Afghanistan." "Airborne, huh?" Bull smiled slightly. "Well, even you jarheads are better than civilians who disrespect the uniform." The 5th biker, an older black man named Raymond Preacher Williams, called that because he always tried to be the voice of reason, stepped forward. "James, my man, first things first. You got somewhere to be tonight? Somewhere safe? I usually head to the shelter on Champa Street if it gets too cold, James replied. Otherwise, I got a spot under the highway overpass. Bull and his crew exchanged glances. They were all thinking the same thing. Listen, Bull said, his tone firm but kind. That shit that just happened, that's not okay. And we're not just going to let it slide. I appreciate that, James said carefully, but I don't want any trouble. I can't afford trouble. We're not talking about trouble, Snake interjected. We're talking about justice. That kid needs to learn that actions have consequences. What did you have in mind? James asked, curious despite himself. Bull pulled out his phone, looking at the photo Carlos had sent him. This car, these plates, we can find him. We got connections, and when we do, we're gonna have a conversation with him. An educational conversation. James felt something stir inside him, not quite hope, but something close to it. For years he'd been invisible, stepped on, ignored. And now these strangers, these brothers in arms, were standing up for him. I don't want violence, James said firmly. I'm not about that. Neither are we, Preacher said, which earned him skeptical looks from some of the others. Well, not unnecessary violence anyway, but this kid needs to understand what he did. He needs to understand who you are, who we all are. Bull nodded. Here's what's going to happen, James. First, we're getting you a hot meal at McGinty's. Danny's already squared it away with the owner. He's a vet too, Army Rangers. Then, we're going to make sure you got a warm place tonight. After that, we're going to track down this Tyler kid and teach him some manners. Tyler? James asked. You know his name? Carlos held up his phone again, grinning. Modern technology, brother. Ran his plates through a buddy of mine who works at the DMV. Tyler Harrington III, lives in Cherry Creek, that fancy neighborhood. His daddy's some big-shot real estate developer. Of course he is, Jake muttered. James felt overwhelmed. He'd been alone for so long fending for himself that having people, brothers, step up for him was almost too much to process. Why are you doing this? James asked, his voice thick with emotion. You don't even know me. Bull put a heavy hand on James's shoulder. Brother, I don't need to know your whole story. I saw that flag, that Purple Heart, those patches. You served, you bled for this country, and that means something. That means your family, and we don't let family get disrespected like that. The other bikers nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. James's eyes welled up, but he blinked back the tears. He'd cried enough in his life. I don't know what to say. And don't say anything, Preacher said warmly. Just come have a burger with us. Then we'll figure out the rest. As the group walked toward McGinty's, James felt something he hadn't felt in years. Like he mattered. Like he was worth something. Like he wasn't invisible anymore. Inside the bar, the owner, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Tommy O'Brien, had already set up a corner booth for them. The smell of burgers on the grill and the sound of classic rock on the jukebox created a warm, welcoming atmosphere. As James sat down with the bikers, his belongings tucked safely beside him, he looked around at these men who'd stood up for him. Each of them carried their own scars, their own stories of war and what came after. But they'd found brotherhood, purpose, and a way to stay connected to the values they'd fought for. So, Bull said, as Tommy brought over a round of beers and a Coke for James, who'd been sober for 5 years and counting, let's talk about this Tyler kid, because tomorrow we're paying him a visit. And in that moment, with the warmth of the bar around him and the solidarity of brothers beside him, James Mitchell felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The sun rose over Denver with that crisp, clear brilliance that only Colorado mornings can deliver. The sky was a perfect blue, and the first light touched the peaks of the Rocky Mountains in the distance, turning them gold and purple. It was the kind of morning that made people remember why they loved this city. In a small apartment above an auto repair shop on the east side of town, James Mitchell woke up in a real bed for the first time in 6 months. Bull had insisted. After dinner at McGinty's the night before, where James had eaten the best burger he'd had in years and listened to war stories that made him laugh until his sides hurt, Bull had refused to let James go back to the streets. I got a spare room, Bull had said, brooking no argument. It's small, but it's got a bed and it's warm. You're staying there tonight. We'll figure out tomorrow when tomorrow comes. And now, lying in that small room with its single window overlooking the street, James stared at the ceiling and wondered if last night had been real. The humiliation on Colfax Avenue felt like a distant nightmare, replaced by the unexpected kindness of strangers who'd become brothers. There was a knock on the door. "You awake in there?" Bull's gravelly voice called out. "Yeah," James replied, sitting up. "I'm up." "Good. Get dressed. We got work to do." 30 minutes later, James found himself in Bull's kitchen, a small but tidy space that smelled of coffee and bacon. Bull was at the stove, cooking breakfast with the efficiency of a man who'd spent years in military mess halls and then learned to fend for himself. "Hope you like your eggs scrambled," Bull said, sliding a plate across the small table. "And help yourself to coffee. It's strong. Marine strong." James smiled, pouring himself a cup. "Stronger than army coffee?" "Brother, everything's stronger than army coffee," Bull replied with a grin. As they ate, Bull laid out the plan. "The guys are meeting here at 1000 hours. We're going to take a ride out to Cherry Creek, see if we can have a conversation with young Mr. Harrington." "What kind of conversation?" James asked carefully. Bull leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "The kind where he learns that respect isn't optional. See, James, guys like him, they've never faced real consequences. Mommy and Daddy fix everything. They think they're untouchable, but they're not. I don't want this to turn into something that gets you guys in trouble," James said. "You've already done so much." "Stop right there," Bull interrupted. "This isn't just about you anymore. This is about what's right. That kid didn't just disrespect you. He disrespected every person who ever put on a uniform. He disrespected the sacrifices we all made, and that's not something I can let slide." James understood. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. At exactly 10 o'clock, the rumble of motorcycles filled the street outside. Snake, Rookie, Tank, and Preacher arrived together, their bikes gleaming in the morning sun. They filed into Bull's apartment, filling the small space with their presence. "Morning, gentlemen," Preacher said, ever polite. "James, you sleep okay?" "Better than I have in months," James admitted. "Good," Snake said, pulling out his phone, "because today's going to be interesting. Tank, you got the address?" Tank nodded, showing his phone screen to the group. "Tyler Harrington III lives with his parents at 2847 East Cedar Avenue. That's right in the heart of Cherry Creek. Big house, probably worth 3-4 million. Rookie whistled. "Must be nice." "It won't be so nice after today," Snake muttered. "Easy," Preacher cautioned. "We're not going there to trash the place or start a fight. We're going there to educate." Bull stood up, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Listen up. Here's how this is gonna go. We ride to Cherry Creek. We find the house. We knock on the door like civilized people. And then we have a conversation with Tyler and, if necessary, his parents. We explain what happened. We explain why it was wrong. And we make sure it never happens again." "And if they call the cops?" Rookie asked. "Then we deal with that," Bull said calmly. "But we're not breaking any laws. We're not trespassing. We're just having a conversation, a very firm conversation." "What about me?" James asked. "Should I come?" The bikers looked at each other, then at James. "Hell yes, you're coming," Snake said. "You're the whole point of this." Bull nodded. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But Tyler needs to see you. He needs to see who you are, not just some homeless guy he can spit on and forget about." 20 minutes later, the group rolled out. 6 motorcycles. Bull had pulled out an extra bike from his garage for James, an older Sportster that he kept for friends. James climbed on, and the muscle memory kicked in immediately. It had been years, but your body never forgets how to ride. The convoy moved through Denver's streets, drawing stares and attention as they always did. People on sidewalks stopped to watch. Drivers gave them space. There's something about a group of bikers that commands respect and a little bit of fear. As they rode from the working-class neighborhoods of East Denver into the increasingly wealthy areas approaching Cherry Creek, the change was dramatic. The houses grew larger, the lawns greener, the cars in driveways more expensive. This was old money and new money living side by side, insulated from the problems of the rest of the city. They found East Cedar Avenue without trouble. It was a tree-lined street with massive houses set back from the road, each one more impressive than the last. Number 2847 was a modern masterpiece of glass and steel, 3 stories tall with a perfectly manicured lawn and a circular driveway containing 3 luxury vehicles, a Mercedes S-Class, a Range Rover, and Tyler's midnight blue BMW M4. "That's the car," Tank confirmed. "Same plates." The bikes pulled up to the curb across the street, engines rumbling before falling silent one by one. The 6 men dismounted, and for a moment they just stood there, looking at the house. "Damn," Rookie muttered. "This is how the other half lives." "Other 1% more like," Snake corrected. Bull turned to the group. "Remember, we're respectful but firm. We're not here to intimidate, but we're not backing down either. James, you good?" James nodded, though his heart was pounding. This was surreal, standing in front of this mansion, preparing to confront the kid who'd humiliated him just yesterday. They crossed the street and walked up the long driveway. As they approached the front door, a massive thing of dark wood and frosted glass, a security camera above it tracked their movement. Bull rang the doorbell. They could hear it echoing inside the house, a melodious chime that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then through the frosted glass, they could see movement. A figure approached the door. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 40s, impeccably dressed in designer casual wear, expensive jeans, a cashmere sweater, and jewelry that sparkled in the morning light. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly, and her makeup was flawless. This was clearly Tyler's mother. Her eyes widened when she saw 6 large men in leather vests standing on her doorstep. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety and barely concealed disdain. Her hand moved subtly to her pocket, probably where her phone was, ready to call the police. "Good morning, ma'am," Bull said, his voice polite but firm. "My name is Marcus Henderson. We're here to speak with your son, Tyler. Is he home?" "What is this about?" Mrs. Harrington asked, not moving from the doorway. "Tyler hasn't done anything wrong." "With all due respect, ma'am, he has," Preacher said, stepping forward. "Yesterday evening, your son assaulted this man." He gestured to James. Mrs. Harrington looked at James for the first time, her eyes taking in his appearance, the worn clothes, the weathered face. Her expression shifted from anxiety to disgust so quickly it was almost comical. "I don't know what this is about," she said coldly, "but I'm going to have to ask you to leave our property." "Ma'am, we will leave," Bull said calmly. "Right after we talked to Tyler, he spat on this man yesterday. That's assault. We have video evidence. Now we can either have this conversation here privately, or we can take that video to the police and the media. Your choice." The threat was clear, and Mrs. Harrington's face paled slightly. She was calculating, James could see it. Calculating the damage to the family's reputation, the social consequences, the potential legal issues. "Wait here," she said finally, and started to close the door. "No, ma'am," Bull said, putting his boot in the doorway. "We'll wait in the foyer. We're not going to trash your house or steal anything. But we're not staying outside where you can call the cops and have us removed before we get our say." Mrs. Harrington looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Bull's eyes told her that wasn't going to work. She stepped back, allowing them to enter. The foyer was massive, with marble floors and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than a car. A curved staircase led to the upper floors. The whole place screamed wealth and privilege. "I'll get Tyler," Mrs. Harrington said stiffly, and walked toward the staircase, her heels clicking on the marble. The bikers and James stood in the foyer, taking in their surroundings. It was a different world from where they'd come from. "I bet they got more bathrooms than I got rooms in my apartment," Rookie whispered. "Quiet," Bull muttered, but there was a hint of amusement in his voice. They could hear voices upstairs, Mrs. Harrington's urgent tone and a younger male voice responding with irritation. Then footsteps on the stairs. Tyler appeared at the top of the staircase, wearing designer sweatpants and a hoodie that probably cost $300. His hair was messy from sleep, and he looked annoyed at being woken up. Behind him, his mother followed, along with an older man who'd clearly just stepped out of a home office, Tyler's father, presumably. He was wearing a business suit even on a Saturday morning, his silver hair perfectly styled. Tyler started down the stairs, and then he saw James. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by something else, maybe fear, maybe defiance. "What is this?" Tyler demanded, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracking slightly. "What are you doing in my house?" "Tyler," his father said sharply, "what is this about?" Bull stepped forward, his presence filling the space. "Mr. Harrington, I presume. I'm Marcus Henderson. Yesterday evening, your son spat on this man." He gestured to James. "On Colfax Avenue, that's assault. It's also deeply disrespectful, especially given that this man is a decorated military veteran." Mr. Harrington looked at Tyler sharply. "Tyler, is this true?" Tyler's face flushed red. "I don't know what they're talking about." "Don't lie, kid," Tank interrupted, holding up his phone. "I got video. Your face, your car, your license plate, everything. You want to keep lying, or you want to take responsibility?" The room fell silent. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington looked at their son, waiting. Tyler's defiance crumbled. "It was just a joke," he mumbled. "I was messing around. It wasn't that serious." "Not that serious." Snake's voice was dangerously quiet. "You spit on a human being. A man who served his country. How is that not serious?" Mrs. Harrington put a hand on Tyler's shoulder protectively. "Tyler made a mistake. He's young. He'll apologize." "No," Bull interrupted. "This isn't about a quick apology so we go away. This is about your son understanding what he did and why it was wrong." Mr. Harrington, to his credit, looked genuinely disturbed. "Tyler, go upstairs. Now." "But Dad—" "Now!" Tyler trudged back upstairs, and Mr. Harrington turned to the group. "Gentlemen, I apologize for my son's behavior. If what you're saying is true—" "It is true," James spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but firm. "I was sitting on Colfax, minding my own business. Your son pulled up, mocked me for being homeless, mocked me for being a veteran, and then spat in my face." Mr. Harrington's jaw tightened. He was clearly angry, but James couldn't tell if it was anger at Tyler or anger at them for showing up at his house. "What do you want?" Mr. Harrington asked, finally. "Money? Is this a shakedown?" Bull's expression darkened. "We don't want your money. We want your son to understand that actions have consequences. We want him to understand that the people he thinks are beneath him, the homeless, the veterans, the working class, are human beings who deserve respect." "My son will be punished," Mr. Harrington said stiffly. "I assure you." "With all due respect, sir," Preacher interjected, his voice calm, "that's not enough. Your son needs to see, he needs to understand, he needs to walk a mile in shoes he's never had to wear." "What are you suggesting?" Mrs. Harrington asked nervously. Bull looked at James, then back at the Harringtons. "We're suggesting that Tyler spends some time seeing how the other half lives, that he volunteers at a veterans shelter, that he learns about the men and women who've served this country and ended up on the streets, that he understands that homelessness isn't a character flaw or a moral failing. It's a complex social issue that affects real people with real stories." Mr. Harrington considered this. "And if we don't agree to this? Then we take our video to the police and to every media outlet in Denver," Tank said flatly. "Assault is assault, and I'm sure the story of a rich kid spitting on a homeless veteran would play great on the evening news." It was a standoff. The Harringtons clearly wanted this to go away quietly, and the bikers were using that to their advantage. Finally, Mr. Harrington nodded. "Fine. Tyler will volunteer. How much time?" 200 hours, Bull said. "Over the next 3 months. At the Veterans Resource Center on Champa Street, and not just showing up, actually working, actually learning, actually making a difference. And if he does this, Mr. Harrington said, "This matter is settled. You delete the video." "We keep the video," Bull said firmly. "Insurance policy. But if Tyler completes his hours genuinely, puts in real effort and learns from this, then yes, we're done. No police, no media, no problem." Mr. Harrington extended his hand. "Deal." Bull shook it, his grip firm. "I'll bring Tyler by the center on Monday morning," Mr. Harrington said. 9 a.m. sharp. "Will that work?" "We'll be there," Bull confirmed. As the group turned to leave, James stopped and looked at Mr. and Mrs. Harrington. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "your son isn't a bad kid. He's just ignorant, sheltered. He doesn't understand the world outside his bubble. But he can learn. He can be better." Mrs. Harrington's eyes filled with tears, whether from shame or gratitude or anger, James couldn't tell. The bikers and James walked out of the mansion, down the driveway, and back to their bikes. As they mounted up and started their engines, James felt a strange mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction in confronting Tyler and his family, but there was also something deeper, a sense that maybe, just maybe, something good might come from all this. As they rode away from Cherry Creek, heading back toward the parts of Denver that felt more like home, Bull pulled up alongside James at a red light. "You did good in there," Bull shouted over the engine noise. James nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He'd faced down his humiliation, stood up for himself, and maybe, just maybe, planted a seed that might grow into something better. The light turned green, and the convoy roared forward into the Denver morning. 6 brothers riding together, united by more than just motorcycles and leather. Monday morning arrived with an early snow flurry, Denver's way of reminding everyone that winter was coming. The flakes were light, melting almost as soon as they hit the ground, but they painted the city in shades of grey and white. At 9 a.m., sharp, a black Range Rover pulled up in front of the Veterans Resource Center on Champa Street. The building was humble compared to the Harrington mansion, a converted warehouse with a simple sign and bars on the windows. But inside those walls, crucial work happened every day. Tyler Harrington climbed out of the Range Rover, his face sullen. He was dressed down, jeans, a plain sweatshirt, sneakers, but even his casual clothes screamed money. His father had driven him, sitting in the driver's seat with an expression that suggested this was an unpleasant but necessary task. Bull was waiting at the entrance, along with James and a woman named Maria Gonzalez, who ran the center. Maria was in her 50s, a former Army nurse who dedicated her post-military life to helping veterans who'd fallen on hard times. "Mr. Harrington," Maria said, extending her hand to Tyler. "Welcome to the Veterans Resource Center. I understand you'll be volunteering with us for the next 3 months." Tyler shook her hand limply. "Yeah, I guess." "Enthusiasm is appreciated but not required," Maria said dryly. "Effort, however, is non-negotiable. You're here to work, not to serve out a sentence. Do you understand?" "Sure," Tyler mumbled. Bull stepped forward. "Tyler, this is James Mitchell, the man you assaulted on Wednesday. You'll be working directly with him during your time here." Tyler finally looked at James properly, really looked at him. In the harsh morning light, he could see the lines on James's face, the grey in his beard, the weariness in his eyes. But he could also see the dignity, the strength, the quiet pride of a man who'd been knocked down but hadn't stayed down. I'm sorry," Tyler said, the words awkward and unpracticed. "For what I did, it was wrong." James studied him for a moment. "Apology noted. Now let's see if you mean it." Mr. Harrington rolled down his window. "Tyler, I expect to hear good reports. Your mother and I will be checking in with Ms. Gonzalez weekly. If you don't take this seriously, there will be consequences at home, too. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Tyler said, a flash of genuine fear crossing his face. Whatever those consequences might be, he clearly believed his father. The Range Rover drove away, leaving Tyler standing on the sidewalk with 3 strangers who had every reason to dislike him. "Come on," Maria said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Let's get you started." Inside the center, Tyler's eyes widened. He'd never been in a place like this. The main room was large, with folding tables and chairs set up throughout. At various tables, men and women sat filling out paperwork, talking with counselors, or simply having coffee and conversation. Many were clearly homeless or on the edge of it, their clothes worn, their belongings in backpacks or plastic bags. The walls were covered with bulletin boards showing job postings, housing resources, mental health services, and upcoming events. In one corner was a small computer lab where veterans could search for jobs or access benefits. In another was a clothing closet, organized by size and season. "This is the heart of our operation," Maria explained. "We serve about 100 veterans a day. Some are homeless, some are housing insecure, some are just struggling to make ends meet. We provide meals, case management, job assistance, mental health referrals, and a safe place to spend time." Tyler looked around, clearly overwhelmed. This was a world he'd never even imagined. "Your primary job," Maria continued, "will be to help wherever needed. That means serving meals, organizing donations, cleaning, assisting with paperwork, whatever is required. James will be your supervisor. He knows this place and these people. You'll do what he tells you, when he tells you. Clear?" "Clear," Tyler said quietly. James gestured toward a hallway. "Come on, we'll start in the kitchen." The kitchen was industrial-sized but clean and well-organized. 3 volunteers were already at work preparing lunch, a simple meal of soup, sandwiches, and fruit. The smell of cooking filled the air. "This is Carmen, Doug, and Steve," James said, introducing Tyler to the volunteers. "They keep this place running. Carmen, this is Tyler. He'll be helping out for a while." Carmen, a round-faced woman with kind eyes, smiled at Tyler. "Welcome, mijo. You ever work in a kitchen before?" No," Tyler admitted. "Well, you're about to learn. Grab an apron from that hook and wash your hands. We're making 150 sandwiches for lunch." For the next 2 hours, Tyler worked. He washed his hands until they were red, put on plastic gloves, and began assembling sandwiches under Carmen's patient instruction. Turkey and cheese, ham and cheese, peanut butter and jelly. Simple, efficient, nutritious. At first, Tyler was clumsy, his hands unused to this kind of work. He put too much mayo on one sandwich, not enough meat on another. But Carmen corrected him gently, and slowly he found a rhythm. As he worked, James stood nearby, observing but not interfering. He wanted Tyler to experience this without being lectured. Sometimes the best lessons were learned through doing, not hearing. At 11:30, they began setting up for lunch. Tyler helped carry trays of sandwiches to the main room, where they were arranged on a serving table, alongside thermoses of soup, bottles of water, and baskets of fruit. At noon, the doors opened, and veterans began filing in. They came in all ages, all races, all walks of life. Some were elderly Vietnam veterans, others were young men and women who'd served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some were in wheelchairs, some walked with canes, some bore visible scars, and others carried invisible wounds. Tyler stood behind the serving table, handing out sandwiches and bowls of soup as directed. At first, he barely made eye contact with anyone, but gradually, as the line moved forward, he began to notice things. An older black man with a Vietnam veteran's cap thanked him warmly. "God bless you, son." A woman about Tyler's age, missing her left arm below the elbow, smiled at him. "First day volunteering?" "Yeah," Tyler admitted. "How'd you know?" "You got that deer-in-headlights look," she said with a laugh. "I'm Rachel, Army. Lost the arm in Kabul, 2019. IED blast." Tyler didn't know what to say to that. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Rachel said, taking her sandwich. "I'm alive. A lot of people I served with aren't. That's what matters." She walked away, leaving Tyler stunned. As the lunch service continued, James approached with an older man named Robert. Robert was 72, a Vietnam vet with a weathered face and hands that shook slightly from Parkinson's. "Tyler, this is Robert," James said. "He's got a story I think you should hear." Robert sat down at a nearby table with his lunch, and James nudged Tyler to join him. Tyler sat, still wearing his volunteer apron, feeling completely out of his depth. "James says you're doing some community service," Robert said, his voice rough but friendly. "Something like that," Tyler said. Robert took a bite of his sandwich and chewed slowly. "I was born right here in Denver," he began. "Grew up in 5 Points, back when it was still a jazz neighborhood. Enlisted in the Army in 1969, right out of high school. My number came up in the draft, so I figured I might as well enlist and pick my MOS." Tyler looked confused. "MOS? Military Occupational Specialty," James explained. "Your job in the military." "Right," Robert continued. "I became a combat medic. Thought I'd be safer than being an infantryman. Turned out Charlie didn't care what job you had." He laughed, but it was a dark laugh. "Did 2 tours in Vietnam. Saw things no 19-year-old should ever see. Saved some lives, couldn't save others. Came home in 72. He paused, his hands shaking more noticeably as he gripped his soup cup. "Came home to people spitting on us, calling us baby killers. Nobody wanted to hire a Vietnam vet. Everyone treated us like we were damaged goods. I struggled, man. Struggled with nightmares, with anger, with drink. Lost my wife, lost my job, lost my way." Tyler listened, really listened, for maybe the first time in his life. "Ended up on the streets for 5 years in the 80s, Robert continued. "Lived under bridges, in abandoned buildings, wherever I could. It was James, actually, who helped get me off the streets." He nodded at James with genuine affection. James smiled slightly. "Robert helped me too when I first ended up homeless. Showed me the ropes, kept me safe. We look out for each other. That's what brothers do," Robert said firmly. "The point is, kid," he looked directly at Tyler, "you never know what someone's been through. You see a homeless person on the street, you don't know their story. Could be a veteran, could be someone who had a run of bad luck, could be someone dealing with mental illness or addiction or trauma. They're not less than you. They're just fighting battles you can't see." Tyler felt shame wash over him, hot and overwhelming. He thought about James sitting on that corner with his Purple Heart and his American flag, and how Tyler had treated him like garbage. "I'm sorry," Tyler said, his voice breaking slightly. "I didn't understand. I was a jerk. I was worse than a jerk." "Yes, you were," James said bluntly, "but you're here now, and that means something. The question is, what are you going to do with this opportunity? Are you just serving time, or are you actually going to learn something?" Tyler looked around the room at all the veterans eating lunch, talking, laughing, just trying to get through another day. Each one had a story, each one had served, each one deserved respect. "I want to learn," Tyler said, and for the first time, he meant it. Over the next 2 weeks, Tyler showed up every day. At first, his father drove him, but eventually Tyler started taking an Uber, unwilling to have his privileged background on display. He worked in the kitchen, helped sort donations, organized the clothing closet, and most importantly, talked to the veterans. He heard stories that broke his heart and inspired him in equal measure. He met veterans who'd lost limbs, lost friends, lost years of their lives to PTSD, but were still fighting to rebuild. He met men and women who'd once had good jobs and families and homes, but had lost it all to circumstances beyond their control. One afternoon, James took Tyler out on a street outreach mission. They loaded Maria's van with supplies, sandwiches, water bottles, warm socks, hygiene kits and blankets, and drove to areas where homeless veterans were known to congregate. Their first stop was under the I-25 overpass, where a small encampment had formed. Tents and makeshift shelters clustered together, American flags flying from several of them, a point of pride even in destitution. "Stay close and follow my lead," James instructed. "Don't stare, don't judge, and don't make promises you can't keep. Just treat everyone with respect." As they walked into the camp, Tyler felt afraid. He'd never been in a place like this. But James moved through the camp like he belonged there, because he did. These were his people, his community. "James," called out a man from one of the tents. "That you?" "It's me, Sergeant Morris," James replied warmly. "Brought some supplies. How you doing?" Sergeant Morris emerged from his tent. He was probably in his 60s, rail-thin, with a Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm. "Getting by. This your kid?" "This is Tyler. He's volunteering with me at the center." Sergeant Morris studied Tyler with sharp eyes. "Volunteering or court-ordered?" Tyler swallowed. "Kind of in between, sir." "At least you're honest," Morris said with a hint of respect. "What'd you do?" Tyler looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. "I was disrespectful to a veteran," Tyler said quietly. To James, "I learned a hard lesson about consequences." Morris nodded slowly. "Good. Maybe there's hope for you yet. You here to help or to look at us like we're zoo animals?" "To help, sir," Tyler said firmly. They spent 2 hours at the camp, distributing supplies and talking to residents. Tyler met veterans from every branch of service, spanning from Vietnam to Afghanistan. Each one had fallen through the cracks of a system that was supposed to support them. One man, a former Navy SEAL named Chris, pulled Tyler aside. "You know what the hardest part is," Chris said. "It's not the hunger or the cold or even the danger. It's the invisibility. People walk past us every day like we don't exist, like we're not human. That's what kills your soul." Tyler thought about how he'd treated James, how he'd looked right through him as if he were nothing. "I understand," Tyler said, "and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was one of those people." Chris looked surprised, then nodded. "Takes guts to admit that. You keep that attitude, kid. You'll be all right." As they drove back to the center, Tyler was quiet, processing everything he'd seen and heard. "How do you do it?" Tyler finally asked James. "How do you stay positive when everything's so hard?" James was quiet for a moment, navigating Denver's streets. "I don't stay positive every day," he admitted. "Some days are really dark. Some days I want to give up. But then I remember, I survived 2 tours in Afghanistan. I survived IEDs and firefights and watching friends die. If I survived that, I can survive this. And I remember that I'm not alone. I got brothers like Robert, like Sergeant Morris, like Bull and his crew. We look out for each other. That's what gets me through." "What happened?" Tyler asked carefully. "How did you end up homeless? If you don't mind me asking." James sighed. "It's not one thing, kid. It's a dozen things that all piled up. I came back from Afghanistan with PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks, anger issues. I tried to push through it, tried to be strong. My wife, Angela, she tried to help, but I pushed her away. Then she got sick, cancer, stage 4 by the time they found it. I spent 2 years watching her die, using all our savings on medical bills. When she passed, I fell apart. Started drinking, lost my job, lost my house, lost everything." Tyler felt tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry." "It is what it is," James said, though his voice was thick with emotion. "I got sober 5 years ago, been working on getting back on my feet ever since. It's a long climb back up, but I'm climbing. That's all you can do. Keep climbing." They pulled up to the center, and Tyler helped unload the remaining supplies from the van. As they carried boxes inside, Maria called out to them, "James, Tyler, come here a second." They walked over to find Maria standing with Bull and Mr. Harrington. Tyler's father looked uncomfortable in the center, his expensive suit out of place among the functional surroundings. "Tyler," Mr. Harrington said, "I've been getting good reports from Ms. Gonzalez. She says you've been taking this seriously." "I have been, Dad," Tyler said. "This place, these people, it's opened my eyes." Bull stepped forward. "Your kid's doing good work, Mr. Harrington. Real good work. A few more weeks like this and he'll have learned what he needs to learn." Mr. Harrington extended his hand to Bull. "Thank you for giving him this opportunity, for not just, well, for handling this the way you did." Bull shook his hand. "We all deserve chances to be better. Your kid's taking his chance. That's what matters." As Mr. Harrington left, Tyler turned to James. "Same time tomorrow?" James smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Same time tomorrow, Tyler." Tyler had arrived at the Veterans Resource Center as a spoiled rich kid serving out a punishment. But slowly, day by day, story by story, he was becoming something more, someone with empathy, with understanding, with a newfound respect for people whose lives looked nothing like his own. The transformation wasn't complete, but it had begun. And that, James thought as he watched Tyler head home, was everything. 3 months passed, like water flowing down the South Platte River, sometimes rushing, sometimes slow, but always moving forward. Winter had settled over Denver in earnest now. Snow covered the mountains and dusted the city streets. The temperature dropped below freezing most nights, and the Veterans Resource Center became more crucial than ever, offering warmth and shelter and hope to those who needed it most. On a Friday afternoon in mid-December, Tyler Harrington walked into the center carrying a large box. He'd just completed his 200th hour of volunteer service, but he wasn't stopping. He'd asked Maria if he could continue volunteering even after his requirement was fulfilled, and she'd agreed immediately. "What's in the box?" James asked, looking up from the paperwork he was helping a veteran fill out. Tyler grinned, a genuine warm smile that had replaced the arrogant smirk he'd worn when he first arrived. Christmas presents for the kids. He opened the box to reveal toys, action figures, dolls, board games, art supplies. The center ran a Christmas program for children of veterans, and Tyler had gone all in. "I used my own money," Tyler added. "Well, technically it's my trust fund, but still, I wanted to do something." James felt a surge of pride. The kid had come so far. Over the past 3 months, Tyler had transformed. He'd started as a resentful, spoiled young man serving out a punishment. But somewhere along the way, something had clicked. He'd stopped seeing the veterans as charity cases or learning exercises and started seeing them as people, as friends, as teachers, as inspiration. He'd spent hours talking with Robert, learning about Vietnam and the history Tyler had never bothered to study in school. He'd helped Rachel, the veteran who'd lost her arm, apply for a job at a tech company, and she'd gotten it. He'd gone on multiple street outreach missions with James, bringing supplies and dignity to the homeless veterans living under bridges and in camps. But more than that, Tyler had started questioning everything about his own life. The privilege he'd taken for granted, the assumptions he'd made, the way he'd treated people he considered beneath him. He'd had long, difficult conversations with his parents about wealth, responsibility, and giving back. His mother had been resistant at first, but his father, who'd been quietly proud of Tyler's transformation, had listened. "Maria wants to see us in her office," James said, standing up. "Both of us." They walked down the hallway to Maria's small but organized office. Inside, they found not just Maria, but Bull, Snake, Preacher, Tank, and Rookie, the full crew of bikers who'd started this whole journey. "Sit down, gentlemen," Maria said, gesturing to chairs. Tyler and James sat, looking at the assembled group with curiosity. Maria pulled out a folder. "Tyler, you've completed your 200 hours. More than that, you've exceeded every expectation we had. The veterans here speak highly of you. You've shown genuine compassion, real dedication, and a willingness to learn. I'm proud of you." Tyler flushed with the compliment. "Thank you. But I feel like I'm the one who should be thanking everyone. You all taught me more in 3 months than I learned in 4 years of college." Bull leaned forward. "That's what we wanted to hear, kid. When we showed up at your house that morning, we weren't sure you'd actually change. A lot of entitled people just play the game, serve their time, and go right back to being entitled. But you did the work. You opened your mind and your heart." "I had good teachers," Tyler said, looking at James. "James especially. He could have hated me. He could have made these 3 months hell for me. Instead, he gave me a chance to understand, to see the world through different eyes." James shifted uncomfortably. He'd never been good with praise. "You did the work yourself, Tyler. I just showed you the door. You walked through it." Preacher spoke up, his voice warm. "We wanted to mark this occasion. Your completion of your hours, yes, but more than that, your real transformation. So we got you something." Tank handed Tyler a small box wrapped in simple paper. Tyler opened it carefully. Inside was a leather bracelet, handmade, with a small metal plate engraved with words, "Honor, respect, brotherhood." "It's from all of us," Snake explained. "A reminder of what you learned here, of the bonds you formed. You're part of this community now, Tyler. Whether you're rich or poor, young or old, you're one of us." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Bull replied. "Just keep being the person you've become." Maria cleared her throat. "There's something else. Tyler, we'd like to offer you a position here at the center. Paid, part-time. We need someone to help coordinate our youth outreach program, teaching high school and college students about veteran issues, organizing volunteer opportunities, stuff like that. You've got a unique perspective, coming from where you came from. You could reach kids who might never otherwise engage with this community." Tyler stared at her in shock. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Maria said. "Obviously you'd need to balance it with school or whatever else you're doing. But we think you'd be good at it, and we think it would be good for you." Tyler looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. "Take the job, kid. You're good at this. And these people need someone like you, someone who can bridge the gap between privileged society and the veteran community." "I accept," Tyler said immediately. "Absolutely, I accept." The room erupted in congratulations and handshakes. This was more than Tyler had ever dreamed. Not just redemption for his past actions, but a genuine opportunity to make a difference going forward. After the meeting, Tyler and James walked out into the cold December afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Christmas lights were going up on buildings throughout downtown Denver, transforming the city into something magical. "Can I ask you something?" Tyler said as they stood on the sidewalk. "That night on Colfax, when I did what I did, why didn't you react? Why didn't you yell at me or curse at me or anything?" James was quiet for a moment, watching the traffic flow past. "Because I've learned that anger doesn't solve anything." "Yeah, I was angry, I was humiliated. Part of me wanted to drag you out of that car and teach you a lesson the hard way. But that's not who I am anymore. The military taught me discipline. Homelessness taught me humility. And losing everything taught me that dignity is something nobody can take from you. You can only give it away." "I'm sorry," Tyler said for the 100th time. "I'm sorry for what I did, for how I treated you, for everything." "I know you are," James replied, "and I forgave you a long time ago. The question is, have you forgiven yourself?" Tyler thought about that. "I'm working on it. Every day I come here, every veteran I help, every story I hear, it's like I'm making amends. Not just to you, but to everyone I ever looked down on or dismissed or treated like they didn't matter." "That's good," James said, "because redemption isn't a destination, Tyler. It's a journey. You don't arrive at being a good person. You work at it every single day." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two men from completely different worlds who'd somehow found common ground. "What about you?" Tyler asked. "What's next for you?" James smiled. "Actually, I've got some news. Bull helped me apply for VA housing assistance. I've been approved. I'm moving into a small apartment next month. It's not much, just a studio, but it's mine. 4 walls and a roof, a place to call home." Tyler's face lit up. "James, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Just found out this morning," James said. "Been living on the streets for almost 6 years. Sometimes I thought I'd never get off them. But here I am." "You deserve it," Tyler said fiercely. "You deserve so much more than that, honestly. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." James laughed. "Don't go making me into a hero, kid. I'm just a man who made some bad choices and got dealt some bad hands. But I kept playing, that's all." "That's everything," Tyler corrected. A familiar rumble filled the air, and they looked up to see Bull's motorcycle pulling up to the curb. Behind him were the other 4 bikers, their formation tight and practiced. Bull pulled off his helmet. "We're heading to McGinty's for dinner. You two should come, our treat." "I don't know," James said hesitantly. "I've got some stuff to do at the shelter." "James," Bull interrupted. "Get on the damn bike. You too, Tyler. We're celebrating. James getting his apartment, Tyler finishing his hours and getting hired. These are big deals. Let us mark the occasion." James looked at Tyler, who was grinning hopefully. "All right," James relented. "But I'm buying the first round." "With what money?" Snake called out, and everyone laughed. "I'll figure it out," James said with a smile. They climbed onto the bikes, James on the spare Sportster, Tyler riding passenger behind Rookie. As the convoy pulled away from the curb, Tyler felt a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. Not the artificial belonging of country clubs and private schools, where membership was based on bank accounts and family names. This was real. This was brotherhood. At McGinty's, Tommy O'Brien had reserved their usual table. The bar was decorated for Christmas, with strings of lights and a slightly crooked tree in the corner. The jukebox was playing classic rock, and the smell of burgers and beer filled the air. As they settled into the booth, laughing and talking over each other, James looked around at the faces gathered there. Bull and his crew, who'd stood up for him when he had nothing. Tyler, who'd transformed from tormentor to friend. Maria, who'd shown up to join them, bringing her fierce compassion and organizational skills. Even old Robert had made it, his hands still shaking but his smile wide. This was family. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose. The family you build through shared struggles and mutual respect. Bull raised his glass, beer for most of them, Coke for James. "A toast," he announced, "to Tyler for having the courage to change, to James for having the dignity to forgive, and to all of us for remembering that we're stronger together than apart." "To brothers," Preacher added. "To family," Maria said. "To second chances," Tyler contributed. They clinked glasses, and the sound rang out like a bell, clear and true. As the evening wore on, Tyler found himself telling stories about his volunteer experiences that made everyone laugh. He'd come so far from the arrogant kid who'd spat on a homeless veteran. He'd learned what truly mattered, not money or status, but character and compassion and the courage to admit when you're wrong. James watched Tyler with satisfaction. The kid would be okay. More than okay. He'd be someone who made a difference in the world. Later, as the group was getting ready to leave, Tyler pulled James aside. "I want to help," Tyler said quietly. "With your apartment, furniture, supplies, whatever you need. Please let me do this." James started to protest, but Tyler held up his hand. "Not as charity," Tyler insisted, as a friend, as someone who cares about you. You gave me something invaluable. You gave me perspective, empathy, purpose. Let me give you something back, please." James studied Tyler's face and saw only sincerity. "Okay," he said finally, "but nothing fancy, just the basics. Deal?" "Deal," Tyler agreed, shaking James's hand. As they walked out into the cold December night, snow was beginning to fall. The flakes drifted down soft and quiet, blanketing Denver in white. The city looked clean, fresh, like anything was possible. Bull fired up his motorcycle, the engine roaring to life. "Where to now, James? We'll give you a ride wherever you need to go." James looked up at the falling snow, then at the faces of his brothers gathered around him. "You know what? Just drop me at the shelter. I've got a few more weeks there before I move into the apartment. But after that," he smiled, "after that I'll have an address, a real address." As the motorcycles rumbled through the snowy streets of Denver, James felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope. Not just for himself, but for Tyler. For all the veterans struggling to find their way. For everyone who'd ever been knocked down and was trying to get back up. The past couldn't be changed. That moment on Colfax Avenue would always be part of his story. A painful memory of humiliation and despair. But it had also become something else. A turning point, a catalyst for change. Not just for him, but for Tyler too. Sometimes the worst moments in life open doors to something better. Sometimes rock bottom is the foundation on which you rebuild. Sometimes a rich kid's cruelty becomes an opportunity for growth and redemption for everyone involved. As they pulled up to the shelter, James dismounted and handed the helmet back to Bull. "Thanks for the ride," James said. "Thanks for everything." Anytime, brother," Bull replied. "You need anything at all, you call me. Day or night." "I will," James promised. He walked into the shelter, the sound of motorcycles fading behind him, and for the first time in years he didn't feel like a homeless veteran. He felt like James Mitchell, a man who'd served his country, survived war, endured hardship, and come out the other side stronger. He had a job helping at the center. He had an apartment waiting for him. He had friends, real friends, who cared about him. He had purpose and dignity and hope, and maybe, just maybe, that was worth all the struggles it had taken to get here. Outside, Tyler sat on the back of Rookie's bike, watching James disappear into the shelter. He thought about the journey he'd been on these past 3 months, the person he'd been and the person he was becoming. He pulled out his phone and looked at the background photo, a picture he'd taken at the center of James, Robert, Rachel, and several other veterans, all smiling. His real family photo. "You good?" Rookie asked, looking back at him. "Yeah," Tyler said, and he meant it. "I'm really good." The convoy roared back to life, carrying Tyler through the snowy Denver streets toward his house in Cherry Creek. But he wasn't the same person who'd left that house 3 months ago. He was someone better, someone changed, someone who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in money, but in character, compassion, and the connections we forge with others. The story that had begun with cruelty on a street corner had transformed into something beautiful, a story of redemption, growth, and the power of brotherhood. A story that proved people could change, that second chances mattered, and that sometimes the most unlikely people could become the best of friends. As Christmas lights twinkled throughout Denver and snow continued to fall, 2 men, a homeless veteran and a rich kid, had found their way to something better, together. And in the end, that's what brotherhood is all about. The end. This story was created to highlight the real issues facing homeless veterans while showing the power of redemption, education, and human connection. While fictional, the struggles depicted are very real for thousands of veterans across the United States. If you or someone you know is a veteran in need of assistance, please contact the VA Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255 or reach out to local veteran resource centers in your area.